My last name is Garay. Not Gray, not Gary, not Garay, Garay. Like God and I, pero con más sabor. I've had people look at me and say, I can't pronounce that, so I'm just going to call you John Gary. And to which I look right back at them and say, no, you're not. And it's not because I'm trying to be petty. Es porque I know that my name isn't too hard to pronounce. They just simply aren't willing to try. And that right there is what this episode is all about. A ver, vecino, let's sit down for this one. Make sure to grab your cafecito. Welcome to episode 11 of the Entre Mundos Podcast. This is a space for bicultural Latinos navigating life between cultures. Y aquí hablamos de cultura, identidad, mental health, family expectations, and what it means to honor your roots without losing yourself. For those of you that are new here, I'm John Eli. I'm your bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. I work as a trauma-informed counselor and nervous system educator. But more than that, I'm someone who has lived in this in-between space his whole life. This podcast is my way of putting language to what a lot of us carry, but don't always know how to say. Now, before we get deeper into today's conversation, I want to offer a quick reminder. This podcast is not therapy, and it's not a replacement for therapy. This space is for reflection and conversation. Mejor think of it as a plática con tu vecino favorito. All right, ahora sí, let's talk. Okay, vecino, so check this out. For the past 10 episodes, we've been talking about all the different expectations that us bicultural Latinos carry from our familias and from our cultura. The pressure to keep the peace, to not set boundaries, to stay strong, to not talk about mental health, all of that. Pero hoy vamos a hacer algo diferente. Today we're flipping it around because there's another set of expectations we live with that doesn't get talked about as much. Las expectativas that come from our dominant American culture. The pressure to assimilate, to fit in, to make ourselves easier to digest. Today, vamos a hablar de eso. Mira, let me ask you something. Have you ever had somebody refuse to say your name right? And not because they couldn't, pero porque they didn't feel like trying. Maybe they shortened your name. Maybe they gave you a nickname that you never asked for. Maybe they looked at it on a piece of paper, sighed and said, is there something easier that I can call you? Y te quedaste ahí smiling saying, yeah, sure, that's fine. Mientras something inside of you quietly went, hey, that's not my name. Porque here's the thing. It really isn't that hard to say Fernando or Guadalupe or Guatemala. People learn how to pronounce names like Tchaikovsky, Bocelli, and all the names of their favorite Italian wines. But whenever it comes to our names, suddenly les cuesta mucho. And what gets communicated, even when nobody is saying it out loud, is this. You'd be a little easier to be around if you were a little less you. And that's where I want to start today. Because this is what assimilation actually asks of us. And it's not all at once, not always in some big dramatic moment. It happens in small things. The name that gets shortened, the accent somebody points out in the meeting, the Spanish word you said correctly that made the whole room chuckle. The wow, your English is so good. Like if you weren't bicultural. And little by little, without anybody ever spelling it out, you start to absorb a message. It's not really about your name or your accent or your Spanish. It's about whether you're willing to make yourself a little smaller, a little more familiar, and a little less Latino so that everybody else can feel comfortable. That is the pressure of assimilation. It's not a law. It's not a rule somebody hands you. It's 1,000 tiny moments that add up to one big ask. Be less of who you are so that everybody else doesn't have to adjust. And I'll be honest with you, this is personal for me. My first name is John Eli. And nobody ever struggles with John. Pero mi apellido es Garay. And you'd be surprised how many people decide that it's just not worth the effort. And every time I say the same thing, it's Garay, like God I. Go ahead and try it. Mira, I'm not going to sand down my own name to make it easier for somebody who has no intention of remembering it. And it's the same thing when I speak in Spanish. I love vacationing in Costa Rica, and I love to say it the way it's meant to be said, Costa Rica. And sometimes people hear me and they laugh. And so I tell them with all the love in the world, hey, you're the one saying it wrong. Porque mira, Spanish is not a mistake. It's a language with its own history, its own beauty that was here long before any local decided we should all sound the same. Saying a Spanish word correctly doesn't make me less American. It just means that I'm bilingual. And here's where it gets even deeper. Porque assimilation doesn't just ask you to change your name or your accent, it asks you to adopt a whole definition of success different than the one that we were brought up with. Here in the USA, success usually gets measured one way, income. Y eso incluye productivity, title, degrees, how big the house is, how new the car is, how impressive the job sounds at a dinner party. Y si no te cuidas, you start chasing somebody else's dream. Permítame contarles de un trabajo que tuve that completely rearranged how I understand and define success. About 7 years ago, I worked for a big health insurance company as a member navigator. And my job was to go into people's homes and to help them make appointments, to help them understand their coverage and get what they needed. At times, I'd visit members in affluent neighborhoods where the houses were beautiful and the yards were perfect. And from the outside, everything looked like success. Pero adentro, people were isolated. The neighbors didn't know each other. Nobody was checking in when somebody got sick. There was money, there was comfort, and underneath it was this quiet loneliness that nobody was talking about. Y luego I drive across the town to a mobile home park in a Latino neighborhood. Y era completamente diferente. There was vecinos platicando in each other's yards, food going over the fence, somebody giving somebody else a ride to the doctor, somebody watching the neighbor's kids, people celebrating together, birthdays, holidays, you name it. Y a pesar de la pobreza, había alegría en esas casas. It was real and present joy that was undeniable. I'll never forget walking into the home of an elderly Mexican woman, and she didn't have much at all. But she had taken plastic forks and purple lace, and she turned them into these elaborate wall decorations. She made her whole home beautiful with whatever she had, con intención, with creativity, con dignidad. And the second that I walked through her door, she made me feel completely welcome, like I had always been expected. I've never forgotten her because she taught me something that no corporate training ever could. See, joy isn't about what you have. And community is not about your zip code. And real dignity doesn't wait for a bigger budget. Sometimes it just shows up with plastic forks, purple lace, and someone who makes a decision to make something beautiful anyway. So whenever somebody tells me that success is six figures and a title, I think about that woman. And I think about how success might actually be a home where people feel welcome. It might be showing up for your people. It might be the kind of wealth that doesn't fit on a paycheck. And there's one more thing that I need to bring up because it's the part that does the most quiet damage. This country loves to say that anyone can make it if they just work hard enough. I grew up on a farm in Hatch, New Mexico. I know that's not true. We're told that the opportunity is there for everybody. It all comes down to effort. I grew up in the Hatch Valley, and I want to tell you about two people I graduated with. High GPAs, smart, capable, hardworking, every reason in the world to go to college, but they never got to go. Not because they didn't work hard, not because they didn't want it badly enough, but because they were undocumented. And the last I heard, one of them was still working as a farm laborer. Earlier this year, somebody that I went to school with left a comment on my social media and telling me that we all came from the same place and we all had the same opportunities. Y me puse a pensar porque that's the furthest thing from the truth. In my case, neither of my parents finished high school. Uh, Neither one of them went to college y vivíamos en la pobreza. Y él, his family ran a successful business. And his mother, who honestly is one of my favorite people from the whole community, era una persona increíble. She was a pillar in that town. And she had connections across the county, relationships, and resources that opened doors for her kids that most first generation Latino families didn't even know existed. The truth is, we most definitely did not have the same opportunity. Y lo digo sin resentimiento, without any bitterness towards the family. I say it con claridad because it's the truth. Mira, when we pretend that everybody starts from the same place, we ignore real barriers that real people face every day. Generational poverty is real. Immigration status is real. Discrimination is real. The absence of mentors and networks, that somebody who can open the right door at the right moment, is real too. And whenever we don't name those things, people start to believe that if they haven't made it, it must be their own fault. That classmate of mine who couldn't go to college didn't fail the American dream. It's that the American dream failed to include him. Now, I want to slow down here porque I want to be real with you about what all of this actually does to a person. Because whenever you spend a lifetime getting these little messages, change your name, soften your accent, tone down the Spanish, look a little less Latino, it all adds up. And what it leaves behind is complicated. And for me, there's grief in it, a kind of ambiguous grief where I find myself mourning things that I wanted, but couldn't always reach because of where I came from and how I sounded. Be honest with you, there's anger, there's frustration, but there's defiance too. That fire that shows up whenever somebody tries to tell you who you're allowed to be. Y debajo de todo eso hay determinación, determination. Mira, I hold 3 graduate degrees. And I'll be honest with you, part of me earned them to prove something, not just to the world, pero to myself, that I can, que yo sí puedo. And that where I come from was never going to be my ceiling. Mira, I want to name something here because I think a lot of us need to hear it. We were raised to believe that some of our emotions are good and some of them are bad. That some feelings are okay and others you should be ashamed of. Pero te digo la verdad, every emotion that you have ever felt is exactly the one that you needed to be feeling in that moment. The grief, the anger, the pride, the determination, todo, even if it was all at once. Emotions aren't character flaws. They're your body responding honestly to the world around you. So when those feelings show up because somebody tried to erase a piece of who you are, those emotions aren't problems to fix. They're information. Escúchelas. Listen to them. Well, entonces, what do we do with all of this? Look, I don't want to leave you sitting in the weight of all of this. Here's what I've come to believe. There's this pressure to pick a side. America tells us to become more American, and sometimes our own community tells us you're becoming too American. And we end up stuck in the middle, feeling like we don't fully belong anywhere. Too American for some of our relatives and too Latino for some Americans. But what if we didn't have to pick? What if your identity was never meant to fit in one box? What if you could be American and Latino too? What if you could think in English and feel in Spanish? What if you can be the person who succeeds in the corporate room and the same person who knows exactly how that abuelita felt making art out of plastic forks? That's not confusion. That's not being torn. That's being whole. En mi opinión, assimilation is a horrible goal. A better goal is integration, not erasing yourself to belong, but bringing your whole self into every room you walk into. Your name said correctly, your accent sin pena, your language sin pedir permiso, and your own definition of success wide enough to include the people you love and the place that you came from. No tienes que elegir between making it in American spaces and staying connected to who you are. You can do both, not by splitting yourself in two, but by refusing to leave any part of yourself at the door. So I'll leave you with this, vecino. Think about the moments when you were asked directly or indirectly to be less of who you are just to belong somewhere. ¿Qué dejaste atrás? What did you give up? And was it worth the cost? And then ask yourself this: is there something you left at the door that it might be time to go back and pick up? Your name, your language, your accent, your way of building community, your own definition of what a good life looks like. Because none of those things were ever the problem. They were always the point. If this is something that you're actively working through, I put together a free boundaries guide specifically for bicultural Latinos. It walks you through how to start using your voice without feeling like you're losing your people. And you can find it on my Substack. The link is in the description. And if this is something you've experienced, know that you're not the only one. These are conversations many of us have lived but never have had the space to talk about. So if someone came to mind while you were listening, compártelo. Send them this episode, porque sometimes hearing something said out loud can make a difference. Oh yeah, before I let you go, every Monday I drop a new episode right here on Entre Mundos. And every Tuesday over on Substack, I take the topic we talked about and go deeper into it. The psychology, the cultural layer, all of it. Think of the podcast as the conversation and the article as where we really sit down with it. So if today's episode opened up something for you, know that the article drops mañana. The link is in the description también. And if you want to continue this conversation, you can always find me on Substack, TikTok, and Instagram under Entre Mundos Collective. And of course, don't forget to tell all your vecinos about your favorite bicultural vecino who understands cultura y psychology. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your people, and keep honoring your roots without losing yourself. Un abrazote fuerte. Hasta luego. Bye.